Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. Brian Wilson. Larry O'Connor is back in the house, and we couldn't be happier about that. Welcome back, Larry.
Thank you, Brian. I'm here to stay.
I noticed the goatee is gone, and your hair looks mysteriously less gray, but I'm just going to say, I just can't help but notice.
You know, I relax a little bit, and my hair goes back to its traditional color.
I'd stick with that story. See how well that goes. Hey, a little unfinished business very quickly. On Friday we were raising money, as we do once a year, for the Fisher House. The folks at Fisher House, a really great cause. The Radiothon started with us and ended Saturday afternoon late. All told, you contributed $290,000 to the Fisher House. And so we want to say thank you very much.
That is fantastic. I'm so sorry I missed that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do it next time.
The Fisher House, folks, it's a good cause. And by the way, even though our Radiothon is gone, if you feel so led, they'll still take your contribution. Hey, Joe diGenova's on the line, and I got stuff I need to ask Joe.
We got stuff to talk about with this.
I am so confused, Joe. I mean, I hear that the top court, the Supreme Court, was reviewing gay marriage cases, and that apparently they finished without taking any action or deciding not to take action. I'm a little confused about what's going on here, Joe, and I hope you can clear it up for me.
Well, they have a number of cases that they could take, several involving the Defense of Marriage Act, which, as you know, is a federal statute that says gay marriages do not have to be recognized by the federal government or the states. That's been struck down by a number of courts, federal courts of appeals. It seems that that's a natural for them to take. They may be looking at the cases further to decide whether or not to take them. I haven't seen any report on whether or not they've decided anything. Today would be the day that they might announce it, since they're getting... this is the time of the year when they would these cases are up there pending. So I don't know. I have no inside information about what's happening.
I mean, Joe, I don't understand if one state like Maryland allows same-sex marriage and another state doesn't recognize it. What happens if you get married in Maryland and then you move to a state like Alabama, let's say?
Well, that's the problem. You see, all along from the beginning of this debate, there's something called the full faith and credit of a clause of the United States Constitution, which says that State 1 must recognize the judgments of State 2. What the DOMA Act tried to do was say, no, you don't. When it comes to something that is a state-decided issue, like what constitutes a marriage in Virginia or D.C., what one state says matters for that state only. And therefore, other states are not required to recognize those marriages, even if people move there, because those people have knowingly made a decision that they're going to move to a state that doesn't recognize their marriage.
Right.
This is the complexity of an issue like this. Once you go down these roads, there are other rights and privileges that become effective, and that's what causes the constitutional problem.
And so when the president says that he thinks that each individual state should be able to make this decision for themselves, it's completely disingenuous.
That is correct, because he knows that ultimately the Supreme Court could say that's no longer any good because it denies those people equal protection of the laws in the United States, since their marriages are legal one place and they become illegal in another. This is a very difficult issue for the court, but there's no way they can avoid it. They have to take one of these cases.
Well, I mean, but that's my point. I mean, the Supreme Court could take action today and decide they're going to hear a case,
if they have four votes.
They could do that, and that would be a big deal. And then if they chose to do nothing, as I understand it, it's also a big deal.
Yeah, because it leaves the state of the law completely unresolved. Plus, it leaves a federal statute enacted and signed into law, in this case, signed into law by President Clinton. It makes that law unconstitutional without a ruling from the Supreme Court. No. There's no way the court can allow that to stand.
So when there's a vagary in the law, that's when the Supreme Court is supposed to step in.
They have to take the DOMA case. They have to take one of them. They cannot let this state of the law exist.
What other things are you looking for from the court right now, Joe?
Well, that's actually the most important thing. I mean, there's very little else on their plate of any moment. I mean, because there aren't any big deals happening right now. All the big stuff, the Obamacare stuff that's working its way up hasn't made itself there.
Right.
However, they did tell the Fourth Circuit in Richmond to re-examine the question of whether or not Obamacare violates First Amendment religious freedoms by forcing certain religious-affiliated institutions to carry certain types health coverage. That will make its way up to the court. That instruction to the Fourth Circuit to rehear and reconsider a case which it had rejected is a pretty important sign that they're probably going to take a case involving religious freedom, which, as you know, was a big deal for the Catholic cardinals and bishops during the last election, although Catholics turned on the church and voted for Obama in record numbers.
All right, so Marion Barry's got this idea. It's not a new idea. It's been around for a while. That says, look, if the district's going to hire a company to build certain things inside the district, they can only choose construction companies that are based in the District of Columbia. The way I read that is he wants to only hire construction companies that might have actually made a contribution to his campaign.
Well, that certainly ultimately could be the realistic version of it. These are so-called business preferences, and they have been upheld by most courts as long as they are so-called reasonable, quote-unquote. What happens in most instances, Brian and Larry, is that when these restrictions become too great, and a city can no longer get the services that it needs to pay for because it's limited the pool of available companies, they simply ignore the law, create exceptions, create waivers, just like the president did with Obamacare, and they hire who they need to hire. This is feel-good legislation, and it's actually useless, it's harmful, but it makes Marion Barry feel good, and of course, he's always wanted to feel good.
All right, listen, fair enough. Thank you much, Joe. Always good to see you.